Hey guys, so we're going to go ahead and start the next step of the tutorial on how to make a replica helmet. This part of the tutorial is going to show you how to cast your helmet. Specifically, we're going to be using the slush-casting method. And this is the step that finally you get to see all your hard work that you put into your sculpt and your mold and everything, and you finally get your wearable helmet that you can put on and you can finish painting up and sit up on your shelf or whatever. And it's just where you finally get to see the fruits of your labor. So we're just going to need a few things. Obviously, you're going to need your mold that you finished in the previous steps, and you need to have your two halves of your mother mold bolted together around your jacket mold, your silicone, and make sure it's all seated nice and ready to go like I showed you at the end of the last step. So we're going to need that. You're going to need a couple cups. I like to use 3 cups, but you can use 2 if that's all you have, as long as one of them is big enough to hold both amounts of part A and part B of your plastic. But I'm just going to use 3. And you're going to need a mixing stick, maybe a rag, and then you're going to need your urethane plastic. Now there's tons of different kinds of plastic that smooth on cells. You can just go on their website and read the descriptions and see what fits your needs and your preferences. I've had good luck with their slush-cast 300. Just a 1-to-1 ratio by volume mixture, part A and part B, super easy to use. And so that's what I'm going to be using today. But a lot of the processes that I'm going to show are pretty similar to some of the other plastics, and I have tried some too as well. So that's all you're going to need for this step in the process, and so we're going to go ahead and get started. So first off, you need to figure out how much plastic you think your helmet is going to need. Now it kind of varies between helmets, depending on the size and the shape and complexity of the helmet of how much plastic you need. You just got to determine how much you think it's going to need, and it's not super critical because we're not trying to coat the entire helmet in one go, but you still want to get it close so you can have a nice even layer of plastic within your helmet, and in your mold. So the way I cast helmets, I slush cast them, is I'll do 4 applications of plastic. I do 2 on each side, because when you're slush casting, you have to pour your liquid plastic in your mold, and then you have to swirl your helmet around and let the liquid plastic flow over all of the inside of the silicone of your mold and coat all the areas where your helmet is, so that when it dries as a positive helmet of your negative jacket mold. So it's kind of hard if you had enough plastic in there for the whole helmet to swirl it all around, because then you're going to be having it dripping, and it's just hard to get it even. So the way I like to do it is you want to do 1 layer on one side of the helmet. You swirl that around until it cures up almost, and then you flip your mold over and you mix up another batch of plastic and you pour it on that side and you swirl it around, let that cure up almost. Then you flip it back over, mix up more plastic, pour it in, swirl it around, and then finally you flip it over once more and you pour your plastic in, and then you let your plastic totally cure for 3 to 4 hours or whatever, and you can demold your helmet, pull your cast out. So there may be other ways to do it. That's the way I found works well. As far as the amount goes that I use per layer, I usually use about 300 milliliters total. So 150 milliliters of part A and 150 milliliters of part B. Mix them together, stir them around, and then pour them in the helmet. And that seems to work out pretty well for most of my helmets. I get a nice even coat, and it's thick enough to be strong and yet not super thick, so you're wasting plastic, and it's super heavy. So you can play around with the amounts and just figure out what works for you and what works for your helmet. But we're going to do 150 milliliters of both parts, so a total of 300 milliliters of plastic per layer. And like I said, we're going to do 4 layers. And something I also forgot to mention is you're going to want to wear some kind of gloves for this process. I've just got some latex gloves on. I don't know if it affects the plastic or not, but you're not really going to be touching your plastic, so it's not that big of a deal. You can also use some nitrile gloves like I use for the mother mold making process, and I also have used some old leather work gloves in the past, because sometimes your mold can be sharp. You should have sanded them down in the previous step after you finished your mother mold, but sometimes there's still some left and it's a little rough on your hands. So I have used leather gloves in the past, but you want to have some kind of gloves because inevitably some kind of plastic is going to get out of your mold and drip on you, and that stuff is not good to get on your skin. So wear some gloves, and also make sure you have it on old clothes and be in an area where you don't care if this stuff gets. It should be the same as any other step in this process, you know. So we're going to go ahead and mix up our plastic, our first batch, and I'll show you the slush casting. Alright, so make sure you shake up both parts really well. And just going to crack them open and pour them into my cups. And like I said, I'm doing 150 milliliters, around 150 milliliters of both parts. And just like the silicone, this stuff is pretty forgiving with the mix ratio, but you want to try to keep it as close to 1-to-1 as you can. Okay, we'll pour out 150 of our part B. Right, and at this point, if you have some of the tints or the dyes for your plastic that you want to add, you can add a couple of drops of that to one of your parts before you mix them together. That way your helmet gets dyed a particular color. I have done that in the past. I'm not going to do it this time. Definitely not required, it's just preference. So once you have your two parts mixed out, 1-to-1 ratio by volume, you're just going to take your third cup, if you have a third cup, and pour them together. Should try to get it all out of the cups there. Set those aside, and then just stir this stuff up about 45 seconds. Doesn't have to be exact, but any more than that and it'll start curing. This stuff cures pretty quick. It starts kicking. So I just like to stir it up about 45 seconds-ish. Alright, we've got our plastic mixed up. Just pick one side of your helmet and go ahead and pour your plastic in. I don't know how well you guys can see this, but all I'm doing is pouring the plastic right into the mold. Be careful not to spill any. And now we slush cast. So all you do is rotate your mold, and you watch the liquid plastic inside your mold, and watch it cover all of the area that you want your helmet to be, all the area inside your mold. And because we're doing 2 applications on each side, just focus on one side of your helmet right now, one side of your mold. So just make sure you swirl it around and cover every inch of the inside of your jacket mold. It's alright if a little drips out when you turn it upside down, just try not to let it all run out. And pretty quick you'll see the plastic start to thicken up, and it'll start to slow down. Just keep moving it around, try to keep it even. Don't let it pool up all in one spot. Just keep it flowing, keep it nice and even. I wish I had like a head rig or something and a GoPro I could show you the inside of the helmet, but I don't have that. It's definitely a workout for your arms. This mold's heavy. I like to focus sometimes on like the bottom edge of the helmet. That way it's a nice and strong edge. And for this helmet in particular, I'm not focusing too much plastic on the visor area because I'm going to cut that out anyways and replace it with a see-through visor. So that's something you can do sometimes. Okay, so we're getting pretty close here. I can tell the flow is starting to slow way down. and when it starts to cure, you'll see it start to turn a little white, because it's clear, or clear-ish, translucent when it's liquid, and when it starts to cure up, that's when it'll turn transparent white, opaque, or not transparent, it'll turn opaque white. Okay, once it does that, and once it looks like it stopped moving, stopped flowing, then you can set your helmet down. I usually set it aside just for a few seconds, just to let it cure up enough to where it's not gonna drip off anymore, or like separate from the side of the jacket mold when I flip the helmet over. So that looks good. So we're gonna go ahead and flip it over, and we're gonna go ahead and mix up another batch of our plastic, same amount. Try to mark your cups too, so you know which one is which part, so they don't start curing before you're ready to mix them together. So 150 milliliters of part B, and 150 milliliters of part A. And just take your big cup and you can pour them right in the same cup you used to mix them with before. So now with the second coat, you're just going to pour it right into the opposite side of your mold where you didn't get plastic before. That way you can coat that side and start your back and forth. So now you just slush this one around just the same as you did your first coat, except you're focusing on the side you didn't get plastic on before. You can overlap the seam in the middle some to make that strong. And then once you get done with this coat, you're going to go back onto the first side you did plastic and you put another coat on, and then once that cures, then you're going to go back to this side for the final coat. So 2 coats per side. So once you got all 4 layers of your plastic poured in your mold and slush cast around, you can let it cure up for 3 to 4 hours, and you can go ahead and demold it. If you demold it sooner than that, sometimes the helmet can still be curing and it'll warp a little bit, so make sure you let it cure up fully. And I'll show you guys when this thing cures up the demolding, but it's pretty much the same thing as demolding your sculpt after we finish the mold, and you guys already seen that, but I'll go ahead and show it. Just let this cure up and then you can demold it. Alright guys, so our plastic is cured up in our mold. We're ready to demold this thing. I'm going to go ahead and do it in time lapse, just because like I said, you guys have already seen it before. It's the same thing as when you're taking it off your sculpt. Just be careful not to break your plastic, in case you got a thin spot. You can add plastic later, but if you break it, then it's kind of hard to fix. So just be gentle. So all you gotta do is take out your bolts and then flip it over and use your screwdrivers and just gently pry the mother mold off, and then peel your silicone off just the same way you did it before. Just peel your jacket mold off your plastic cast. So I'm gonna go ahead and show you time lapse, and here we go. So I got my plastic helmet out of the mold, and it looks pretty good. Looks like the silicone captured almost all the details perfectly, and looks pretty nice. The only thing is I think because I had problems with my mother mold and I had to add fiberglass there, the fiberglass has acted up with the plastic paste, and because of that, it's warping my helmets, my casts. This is actually the second cast that I've pulled, and the first cast was warped also, but it was warped in a slightly different way than this one. So at first I thought it was just me and making symmetry problems and proportion problems, well, mainly symmetry problems in my sculpt. And I think there was a bit of that, you know, that's to be expected, because this is all by hand. I'm not 3D printing anything or anything like that. This is all sculpted by hand. So there's going to be slight symmetry issues, but I didn't see how it could be that bad. So in looking at that first cast and then looking at this one, the symmetry issues are different. So I think that there's a problem with my mother mold. Once you take your jacket mold off of your sculpt, you're never going to be able to get it back in the same spot as your sculpt unless your mother mold was perfect and you can pour a cast and the cast is exactly the same as your sculpt. So that's like in a perfect world, and obviously these casts aren't perfect. Not sure what I'm going to do about that. I still wanted to go ahead and finish out this tutorial at least to the casting point so you guys can do it, because the processes are all the same. So that's the end of the tutorial on how to make a cast, how to slush cast your helmet. I thank you guys a lot for watching. The next part is going to be how to finish these helmets, how to paint them up, put the visor in them and everything. I may have to split that into multiple parts, but we're going to at least show the painting part of the tutorial. So stay tuned for that. It may be a little farther off than these 3 parts were because I'm having issues with the symmetry here, like I said, but I'm hoping to get it out pretty soon because I'm excited to get these things painted up and finished. So thanks for watching, guys. See you in the next step.